On paper, Marc Mero had all the ingredients to become one of the WWF's biggest stars of the 90s. After a successful run in WCW as Johnny B. Bad, Vince McMahon was intrigued by Mero's charisma and truly believed he was going to be one of his next big superstars. But despite a strong start, his initial push gave way to a series of problems, and his wife Sable began to eclipse him in popularity. In this video, we're taking a look at the rise and fall of Marc Mero to see why he never became the megastar he was expected to be. Marc Mero was a boxing champion in New York during his earlier years, but an injury forced him into retirement from the sport. That led him to pro wrestling, and he got his big break in 1991 when he debuted in WCW. After a few weeks working as a jobber, he caught the eye of Dusty Rhodes. Rhodes was looking for larger-than-life characters, and he recognised Mero's unique charisma and gave him the gimmick of Johnny B. Bad. This character was inspired by Little Richard, and he was introduced as a heel with Teddy Long as his manager. Mero's natural charisma and that over-the-top entrance made him one of the most recognisable wrestlers on the roster. Really, they had no choice but to turn him babyface because he was just so good at engaging the crowd, and they really loved him too. It seemed pretty damn likely at the time that Mero was going to be a future main eventer. The peak of Mero's WCW career came when he won the television title from Lord Steven Regal at Fall Brawl in 1994. He became one of the most memorable TV champions in WCW history, and he held the belt on 3 separate occasions. And all of this should have been a stepping stone further up the card, but just like so many of the talented wrestlers on WCW's roster at the time, he just ended up treading water. But there was good news for Mero. He was in demand, and demand by Vince McMahon of all people. McMahon had seen a tape of Johnny B. Bad in action, and he was massively impressed with what he saw on that tape. Vince thought that he had loads of natural charisma, and the Little Richard character was exactly the kind of over-the-top gimmick that he loved to see. McMahon sat down for a meeting with Mero, and he brought his wife Rena along with him. Vince was very impressed with Marc, but he was also very enamoured by his wife. McMahon put 2 offers on the table for both Marc and Rena. Eric Bischoff had also offered Mero a new 2-year contract to keep him in WCW. He and his wife decided to sign with Vince instead. Bischoff, of course, ended up burying him on commentary during the next episode of Nitro. No surprises there, this was during the Monday Night War, after all. But Mero didn't have much cause to care about that at the time. Not only had he and his wife just found employment, he also received Vince McMahon's first ever guaranteed contract. Up until now, McMahon had always structured his contracts so the wrestlers earned money based on their matches, their appearances, and merchandise sales, rather than having a fixed guaranteed income. But Mero's new contract guaranteed him $350,000 for the first year, along with a signing bonus, and that increased by $50,000 every year that he stayed with the company. And that was a big deal back in 1996. Clearly, Vince McMahon had high hopes for Marc Mero. Mero first appeared in the WWF at WrestleMania 12, where he saved his wife, who was now known as Sable, from Triple H. Sable had accompanied Triple H down to the ring for his match against the Ultimate Warrior, but their partnership didn't last long. Hunter was very angry after being decimated by the Warrior in their match, and so he threatened Sable backstage. Luckily, Mero was there to step in and save the day. The next night on Raw, Mero made his in-ring debut and beat Isaac Yankem, much to the delight of Sable. She sided with Mero and left in his arms, leaving Triple H furious at ringside. But strangely, Vince didn't give Mero the same kind of gimmick as he had in WCW. Instead, he was given a very vague title. He was known as the Wildman, and it wasn't a very well-defined gimmick. But nonetheless, Mero beat Triple H the next month at In Your House 8, and he got to the semi-final of the King of the Ring tournament before losing to Stone Cold. Then he became the Intercontinental Champion in September 1996 after winning a tournament, but he lost the title a month later to Triple H. This would be his only title reign in the WWF, and that's no surprise considering Vince was already going cold on him. The Wildman character was far less well defined than Johnny B. Bad, and not even Mero really knew what the character was. In an interview, he said, "I mean, when I came there, I didn't even understand what the hell a Wildman was supposed to be. From the jungle? You know, I remember asking Vince. Vince went, 'Why don't we do this Tarzan yell?' I couldn't do it. I don't have a very strong voice, so the Tarzan yell was definitely out of it. So I never really connected with the Wildman character." You see, Vince had fallen in love with Johnny B. Bad rather than Marc Mero, and Mero just couldn't transfer that level of energy to this new gimmick. It was a strange situation because he really did feel like a totally different wrestler here in the WWF compared to what we saw in WCW. There was also tension backstage with the boys, as it was reported that the other wrestlers were resentful over the guaranteed contract that Mero had been given. In February 1997, disaster struck as Mero tore his ACL, which put him on the shelf for 6 months. But it was kind of a blessing in disguise because the time off allowed Vince to take stock and come up with a new plan for him. When he came back from injury, they repackaged him as Marvelous Mark. This character was a boxer. They gave him this gimmick because he'd struggled so much with the Wildman gimmick. They wanted to give him something that was closer to his real life self. It was a surprise that Vince didn't produce a more flamboyant persona for him. You know, like a knockoff of Johnny B. Bad, for example. Sable, on the other hand, wasn't suffering from the same problem. While Mero was on the shelf, she was busy becoming the WWF's new #1 sex symbol, and it was perfect timing for her. Sunny had been the #1 woman in the WWF for a couple of years by this point, but she was starting to become a liability backstage thanks to her behaviour, and so Sable was right there, ready to take over. Marvelous Marc and Sable teamed up to face Goldust and Luna Vachon at WrestleMania 14. Sable was the most popular person in the entire match, and everyone knew who the real star of the couple was. And the WWF recognised it too, and they absolutely started to play into that and started to capitalise on her popularity amongst the fans. On TV, Mero became envious of Sable's popularity. He would come out and cover her up anytime she showed a bit of flesh. And to be fair, this did get him a fair bit of heat from the fans who just wanted to see some puppies. Sable and Luna had an evening gown match at Unforgiven. Mero interfered in the contest, allowing Luna to get the win. Soon after, Sable powerbombed him, and this would be a huge turning point in both of their careers. She was about to go stratospheric, whereas he was about to slide down the card. Behind the scenes, there had been talk of a potential feud for Mero against the rapidly ascending Steve Austin. A program with Austin could have been the lifeline that Mero needed to stay relevant at the time, but it never happened thanks to that powerbomb from Sable. Austin immediately vetoed the feud when he saw that take place. His reasoning was simple. How could the toughest SOB in the WWF be seen taking on a guy who had just been laid out by his wife? Austin understood that perception is everything in wrestling, and Mero lost his credibility when he took that powerbomb. From here on out, Mero became a supporting artist to Sable's feud with Jacqueline. While that feud did have some very memorable moments, none of them involved Marvelous Mark. The feud led to a match at SummerSlam where Sable and Edge beat Mero and Jackie. Of course, Mero was the one who took the pinfall from his wife, and things went even further downhill from there. He lost to Al Snow at Judgment Day in October, and his last appearance on Raw came in November 1998, where he was beat by Dwayne Gill, and then he disappeared from the Federation. Sable, on the other hand, just got more popular in 1999, where she appeared in Playboy as a cover girl and as women's champion when she turned heel, and she was pretty damn good at it too. But by April, her WWF career hit the skids too. Sable filed a $110 million lawsuit against the company, citing sexual harassment and unsafe working conditions. Incredibly, Mero still had 3 years left on his contract with a guaranteed salary, but he had to get major surgery in 1999, and he had plenty of other nagging injuries to recover from too, so he sat out and collected all of that money while he waited for his contract to expire. Marc Mero's WWF career began with all the promise in the world. Vince McMahon had so much faith in his potential and gave him that first ever guaranteed contract, but Mero's career was derailed by him not being able to play the characters he was given with the same energy and charisma as he had in WCW. And when he and his wife signed that contract, he could never have predicted how popular she would become. In the end, it turned out that his run in the Federation just wasn't to be.